Now we're going to cover the center parameters. Once you've watched the videos on joint in parameters and joint out parameters, the center parameters are virtually the same. There's only one difference. Center parameters have the option to control the spacing between rows. We only get one row for joint in parameters, one row of tie rods. We also get only one row of tie rods from the joint out. However, in between those two joints, we can have an unlimited number of rows of tie rods depending on how long the fitting gets. So in this particular case, we would first choose whatever center parameters we want, and then we need to choose how we dictate the spacing between the multiple rows. To start this off, we're simply going to look at the three methods of placement. We have quantity, space, and space exact, exactly what we had for joint parameters. We're going to choose the method space. We're going to say that the minimal spacing is going to be 6 inches and the side offset's going to be 2. Now that's going to control the spacing from one end of the fitting to the other in terms of the width of the fitting. However, we now need to go to the line placement options to control the number of rows between the joints and the spacing between those rows. Currently, there are 4 options for line placement: quantity, space, adjustable, and space exact. 3 of these we've covered earlier in the videos. However, we have not covered the adjustable line placement. What line placement is designed to do is to allow us to specify the method we're going to use to dictate the number of rows of tie rods we're going to get in between the connector in and connector out of a specific fitting. For example, right now we're under the line placement quantity and we have line quantity 1. That means that in the center we're only going to get 1 row. If we said 2, we'd get 2 rows, regardless of how big the fitting would get. If we chose the line placement method space, it would follow the spacing method. Here we would give the minimal line spacing, we'd give it a value. Here it's set at a foot, and PractiCAD would put as many rows as it took to make sure that the distance between rows in the center were not greater than 12 inches. To demonstrate the adjustable line placement parameter, what we're going to do is create a different tie rod. And over here on the left, we've created one called adjustable. We're going to go over there and we're going to take a look at the difference. The only difference between the PCAD tie rod we have here and the adjustable tie rod we created is the line placement here has been chosen to be adjustable and the line spacing is 12 inches. Now what we're going to do is put 2 fittings on the drawing and edit them with both tie rod methods of placement. On the drawing we have 2 fittings. The first fitting on the left has tie rods in it used with the PCAD tie rod we created. The one on the right has tie rods inside of it used with the adjustable tie rod we created. The adjustable one has the adjustable spacing for line placement. The PCAD tie rod on the left has the space method for line placement. To show you the difference between these 2 fittings, we're going to edit them and it'll become apparent how these methods for spacing are different. First, we're going to click on the fitting on the left that was done with the space line placement. Notice that as this fitting gets longer or it's edited so it's larger, that the distance between the tie rods stay the same. And most importantly, that the distance between the connector in and the first tie rod and the connector out and the last tie rod happen to be equal. Even if I were to shrink the length of this fitting right up against the last row of tie rods, PractiCAD readjusts them so that we have even spacing. The adjustable line placement does not work that way. The way the adjustable line placement works is whatever spacing parameter you give it, whatever value, in this tutorial it was 12, it means that the first center row starts 12 inches from either the connector in or the first row of tie rods. And then it continues at 12 inches between rows up until there's no more room to put another row. That would mean that the distance between the last row of tie rods and the connector out is less than your minimal spacing. However, if we were to adjust this to be larger, you can see that it's going to add another row. If we are to adjust it to be shorter though, you're going to see that it does not reapply the tie rods and adjust it as it did here with the space. Space means that from end to end, we take the total length, chop it up in equal segments, and then calculate the spacing upon each edit. When you do it the adjustable space or line placement method, it simply starts from the connector in and goes row at 12 inches, row at 24 inches, row at 36, row at 48, row at 60, and it goes on until there's no room for another row. That could mean that you're going to have tie rods that are closer to the out connection than are the in connection. And that is the difference between these two methods. That is also going to conclude the entire tutorial on how to create a tie rod.